The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Amanda from CCIQ. I'll be your facilitator for today. Joining us is Diana, who is the manager of our international trade here at CCIQ. Exporting overseas can be very exciting but stressful time for any business, as there are multiple steps involved to ensure this is done as successfully and smoothly as possible. In today's webinar, Diana is going to provide you with some information on how to accurately identify correct target markets overseas and what topics you will need to include within your market research. Now, if you have any questions for Diana, you can do so at any stage during the webinar by typing them into the chat box that appears in the bottom right-hand side of your screen. So I'll now hand over to Diana, who will take you through today's presentation.
Thank you, Amanda, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second webinar of our webinar series, the 7 Fundamentals to Export. My name is Diana Georgieva, and I'm the Manager of International Trade for the Chamber of Commerce and Industry Queensland. It gives me a great pleasure to introduce to you today part 2 of our webinar series, the 7 Fundamentals to Exporting. The focus of our discussion today will be on organizing for exports and identifying opportunities. I have mentioned in the first webinar, and I will mention it now, the reason for delivering this webinar series is to assist Chamber of Commerce and Industry Queensland members and other Queensland SMEs that are not export ready to become export ready. Becoming export ready refers to a point where business becomes equipped with the required knowledge and the skills to successfully venture into trading with international markets. CCIQ can assist your business in increasing your knowledge and capabilities in relation to each of these steps so that your business is in the best possible position to succeed in the overseas market. To recap from last week, for those who missed the first webinar, in webinar 1, we discussed how to assess your product export capabilities and your company export capabilities. What we have concluded is that once you have established that you have exportable product, that your company is capable of exporting, that you know your strengths you can build on and your weaknesses to address, then you can move into the next step, which is organizing for exports and identifying opportunities, which is our today's topic. But before to go into our topic, we have a member request to cover very quickly a question in relation to the previous webinar. And I thought this will be useful information for you as well. So in the previous webinar, among other factors, we have established that effective organizational structure is required to be able to accommodate export operations. But what exactly effective organizational structure looks like in a small business? This is the question our member asked us. In a small business, especially when you're a newcomer to exporting, the basic structure of your export department most likely would be limited just to the export manager, the assistant to the export manager, and the export documentation and shipping officer or clerk. If the domestic business manager is trying to handle export orders as well, which they have the tendency to do in the beginning when just the business is starting to export and prepare to export, this could be challenging and can result in not adequate servicing for both domestic and overseas markets. So it's just the need of developing your export markets and to be able to maintain your develop new international markets without actually having a negative impact on your domestic market, you really should consider having an export manager in place and the required other staff which to assist this export manager. However, eventually, when the business is growing, perhaps you might consider including additional staff, such as shipping manager and export market managers. You can have a look at a couple of structures on the screen, so hopefully it makes sense what I'm trying to explain. The shipping manager most likely will recruit a team to look after the customer service. These are the customer service supervisor and customer service assistance officer. And also you have the export markets managers, which are going to be looking after the individual markets. The growth of the export business will result in expansion of the organizational structure. This is where most likely we will see the introduction further of the export director to be responsible for the export sales manager, export marketing manager, export shipping manager, and the technical service manager. So they're pretty much looking after the whole entire business. Then the structure will look like what you see on the screen. More and more specialist functions will be added to accommodate the growth of your business. What you need to know at this very initial stage is that when it comes to organizational structure, depending on where you're at with your export operations, that's how you have to accommodate the development of your export department. Keep in mind that the effective organizational structure should be able to accommodate the export-related requirements, such as to identify, evaluate, and prioritize markets, select agents or distributors, train, manage, and motivate agents or distributors, prepare export quotes and costings, monitor foreign markets regulations, prepare export forecasts, plans and budgets, prepare accurate export documentation, and have the flexibility required to meet challenging and changing market and overseas conditions and environments. These are just a few to mention. Whether you have a basic structure, the one that consists of the export manager, the export manager assistant, and the documentation and shipping officer, or a more complex structure, what you need to know is each of these roles comes with certain functional responsibilities. For example, some of the responsibilities of the shipping manager are facilitating the export orders, preparing the export documentation, including liaising with ourselves through certificates of origin, ATA carnets, and other export documentation. Also liaising with the banks to organize the methods of payments and the actual payments, ensuring that all goods shipped are compliant with the Australian and overseas customs and regulation in market, and also to be able to provide other specifics to the role functionalities. So if this further topic is of interest to you, it is a big topic, please contact us with your specific questions after the webinar, and we can answer them properly to you when we have a little bit more time for this topic. Now, let's get into the topic for today. Organizing for exports and identifying opportunities is the second step to successful exporting. Obtaining preliminary desk research, market selection and evaluation, and market exploratory visits are the key element of the process. Let's have a look what is market research all about, why so important, what are the types of market research we use, and where to find the accurate data from. When it comes to export, market research is the systematic collection, analysis, and reporting of data to help export management decisions. Extensive research is crucial and critical to the success of exporting your product or service to ensure that your company is in the best possible position to launch into the overseas market. A great deal of research you may find is required to identify and qualify opportunities and to plan your export venture. A thorough market research will not only narrow your interest to a manageable number of export markets where your research suggests that is promising to create a demand for your product or service, but we also will help with the development of the right export strategy in place for the selected markets of your choice. There are two types of research you need to know. A preliminary desk research, where you can obtain the data from secondary information sources. This is published data. And primary research, which you conduct in the export market of your interest by talking to your potential distributors or observing the market. Primary data is specific, it is relevant, it is current. However, it can be costly as you have to go in market to obtain this data, and time is required to facilitate. Observations and surveys are the most common methods to obtain primary data. Your secondary data is low cost and readily available. It's just a matter of finding it in the right places. However, it's not specific, not current, may not be directed relevantly to your research objectives, and some data aspects may need further verification when you go into the market. Let's take, for example, if you have some data on your in-market potential distributors, but you will need to meet in person with each of them to verify the scope of their activities, the distribution areas they're covering, the reputation in the market, whether they have interest and knowledge, and what is the degree of interest and knowledge about your product. And your gut feeling, which is very important. Can I work with this person? After all, this person will be, from the beginning of your venture, the person who is going to be representing your business and developing your business in market. Can you facilitate a good working, productive relationship with this person is very important, as they want to avoid costly mistakes. As you see, most likely you will be using both research, both primary and secondary research, and make sure that you allocate plenty of time to do so, because it can be time consuming. The key to effective research is to understand how much information is required, where and how to find it most effectively, what is the cost involved, and what information or data needs to be obtained in the export market. Considering that the costs involved and the time constraints when visiting the market actually can be high, you should do as much as possible research in Australia. Before venturing into excessive researching, first identify what are your research objectives. What you can see on the screen is a simple market research process diagram. Start with the objectives, collect the data from your primary and secondary sources, then analyze the data, and finally prepare the report of your findings and recommendations to implement. It is challenging to quantify how much research will be required, as there's so many variables you need to investigate. You can see on the screen some examples. Make sure that you allocate sufficient time for your research, as without the data it's difficult to make informed decisions in relation to your export venture. Where should I start with my research, you may ask? As a starting point, look at export statistics in Australia to identify whether there are already exports for this product, exported to which markets, what are their volumes and value as well, and are there any seasonal patterns, and who are the exporters who are exporting these products overseas. Research in terms of current and historical data to be able to identify trends. Queensland Government Statistician Office is a good place to start with in respect to Queensland statistics. So is Australian Customs, Austrade, Trade Investment Queensland, AgeLink, University Libraries, Chambers of Commerce, including ourselves, and also bilateral chambers of commerce, of course, such as Queensland-Japan Chamber of Commerce and other bilateral chambers in Australia. The next step is to look into other market statistics in terms of other market export prices for similar products, or perhaps other markets export volumes, and are there any seasonal trends, which can be the case with some agribusiness products in Australia. Overseas government sources, international chambers of commerce. Again, Austrade and Trade Investment Queensland overseas offices can be of great assistance to you. When it comes to market-specific requirement data, it is advisable to find out whether there is a free trade agreement, for example, with Australia. If this is the case, if your product covered by the free trade agreement, what are the HS tariff costs for your product? What are the rules of origin requirements? What are the certification of origin requirements so you importer to be able to benefit from the reduced or eliminated duty rates for your product under the free trade agreement? If this sounds too complex for you, we're just one step away. Our 10-people team serves over 1,700 Queensland exporters, helping them with exactly this: certificates of origin, rules of origin requirements, assistance, and make sure that you actually have a clear understanding how to benefit from the Australian Free Trade Agreements and how to be able to compare the Australian Free Trade Agreements in terms of tariff reductions. Further market research tasks for you, just a few to mention. Identify domestic and international competitors in markets of interest. Not only that, but try to understand your competitors. Do they follow the same industry rules? When they entered into the market, how long they have been into the market? What are their weaknesses and what are their competitive advantage? Identify similar products consumption patterns in market. Who is buying these products? Why they're buying these products? Identify products which are not that may not be identical necessarily, but they have the similar functionality to your product. This is also a competition. This is a competitive product. To be able to determine your competitiveness and to be able to develop future competitive strategies in market, you need to address each of the 7 P's of marketing. For example, what my competitors charge for similar product? What distribution channels are using for similar product? Or what are their promotional strategies in place for similar product? How about the packaging and the labeling requirements for a similar product? How to position my product in the market in comparison with the competitors? What attribute of my product makes it unique and different than the one the competitors are offering? And if this is superior service and I have a high cost associated with this product, perhaps I may consider positioning my product as a superior quality product for the high end of the market. When it comes to people, who is going to be responsible for distribution of my product? Is this going to be a distributor? If this is the case, I might have to have a look at the possible market entry strategy as utilizing a distributor in market. So as you can see, research is critical to be able to make you think how actually I can compete in this market, where my product is in this market, what kind of strategies I have to develop to be able to be not only sustainable in this market, but actually to be successful in this market. I have some more further research tasks for you here, such as market entry options. Now this is moving to the next topic about market entry options for your product. What are the most commonly used in market, and is this meet your export objectives? And actually, we're going to be discussing market entry strategies in our next webinar. So if you're interested to learn a little bit more about agency options, distributorship agreement, licensing, franchising, and how to select distributors, please log into our next webinar. Amanda will give you all the dates and the particulars. Going back to today's topic, research tariff and non-tariff barriers to export is also critical factors to research. And you may actually find interesting that the most common questions we get, with the exception of the free trade agreements and the certificates of origin, the most common questions we get is around the tariff and non-tariff barriers to export. And that's why I'm going to use this as an example for today. Tariff barriers to trade are the tariffs on imports. One of the greatest benefits of the Australian FTAs Australia has in place with other countries are the reduction or full elimination of tariffs of a range of product categories over a certain period of time. These are the tariff barriers commentary on my behalf. It's a topic which I'm very passionate about, but I just don't have time to go into more details about it. There are also non-tariff barriers to trade, such as import licenses, quotas, also seasonal import regimes, state subsidized, complex regulatory environments. So, some practical advice for you in relation to preliminary market research. Please make a need-to-know list. Use reliable information sources as Austrade, Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Trade Investment Queensland, Australia-China Business Council, the Chambers of Commerce and other government and non-government entities, and ourselves, of course. I will provide you with a list you can consider referring to the end of my presentation. And also, when it comes to secondary data, consider various trade publications for this purpose, and even internet, as long as the information comes from reliable sources. Select data carefully and verify the data by cross-referring to other activities, and look for major trends. Our recommendations for you: market research is not one-off. Prepare for commitment to the market research as an ongoing activity, because you have to constantly adjust to the changing overseas and also domestic market conditions, the changing environments. You have to change, you have to be able to update your export plan, which we're going to talk in another webinar about it. And to be able to do that, market research should be ongoing. Analyze and monitor also export opportunities on a regular basis. Rely on reliable information sources for correct data, because this is important. Use your first market visit to ask for advice and feedback from potential buyers, agents, or distributors. You'll be amazed how much you can learn from them. It is information which you cannot find here because it's information you are going to obtain when you're discussing your objectives or your product or your marketing collateral. They can help you with anything. And this advice is really valuable. Your first market visit should also have a follow-up. And the reason for that is not only for market research purposes, but also to develop valuable business relationships. Keep the feedback from your overseas contacts in process to keep an eye on market changes so you can adjust your strategies accordingly. Be on top of your research versus finding out facts when it's too late. For example, you did not have an IP protection in market as you thought that the protection of the IP in Australia covers overseas as well, the overseas market. And as a result, somebody copied your product and registered an identical product in market. Well, basically, what are your chances for your success in this market? Preliminary research is very important to help you with your export market screening, selection, and evaluation, which is our next subtopic for today. Your ultimate goal is to select one or maximum two suitable markets that can be developed quickly. These markets are with high potential, low risk, and relative ease of entry. Finding the right markets for your products, the right customer for your product at the right time and the right place seems challenging. However, a good quality market research can help you considering what are the best options for you, and not only that, but which are with the less risk. When it comes to market screening, assessment, and evaluation, different criteria can be used, outlining key attributes. You can see one example on the screen. As a guide, you can use the market characteristics, competitive conditions, financial economic conditions, legislative and social political conditions criterion. Modify this criterion to reflect what is specific to your product or your service. Get the statistics under each criterion heading, and you can look back at previous years to identify trends, to match the information then to your strengths, and then rank the markets. That's one way about going about it. You can also use, as an example, the market attractiveness matrix you can see on the screen as a guidance. A number of attributes have been identified, such as market size, market growth, competitiveness of your product, ease of market entry, tariff and non-tariff barriers to trade, a few to mention. Let's say you have identified 5 markets of interest. Each market is given a rating of 1 to 5 for each attribute, assuming that 5 is the best and 1 is the worst. Assess each market on each attribute and sum up the final score. This will give you a good indication which market to prioritize. If you need assistance, just contact us and we can help you with the process. And you can see on the screen another example for you, how you can evaluate and select markets of interest, this time based on the marketing matrix. Keep in mind, marketing is one of the many other factors when evaluating and selecting potential markets. Some practical advice: when evaluating markets, you can start with a list, let's say 5 and 6, then reduce the number to 1 or 2, which are the most promising markets. If you're a first-time exporter, you may consider looking at markets that have similar characteristics to Australia, particularly of the areas of legal, business practices, consumer taste, patterns, and behaviors. Once you have the experience and you're more confident with your export knowledge, you might consider exporting to other markets. The next step is visiting the market you have selected. You have to do your homework first in terms of planning the trip, and also the content and planning of your meetings. Which companies I'm going to have meetings with? Who is the right person to send overseas? Is it my highest executive, or is it the person who actually understands the product, the specifications, and can answer any questions that may arise during the meeting? What arrangements and additional research is required? When my meetings will take place with my targeted contacts, and of course where they're going to take place as well. While you're conducting your meetings, also research the available distribution channels for your product. In this initial stage of primary research, the aim is to maximize sales with the shortest possible distribution chain, minimizing the impact on the final user price. That will give you a competitive edge. Visiting the market, the different language, especially the silent language in meetings, the different religion, the social lifestyle, and other factors can result in lack of cross-cultural communications. So we strongly recommend to have expert assistance in the market, especially if you're a first-time exporter. Just include a person who is internationally trained, knowledgeable, who can speak the language and can interpret the silent language as well. Marketing collateral must be in both languages, including your business cards. I realize that many companies who are just starting to export, they don't have much budget for marketing. But don't forget, this is your exploratory mission where you're learning. So you can have a basic marketing material if you can afford to include more money into your into marketing for promotional material, and just ask for advice, the potential distributors or the potential people you're going to be dealing with, what else is going to be workable in the market. And then when you come in place and when you have a little bit more funds, you can actually prepare exclusive marketing material to give you the competitive edge. This is your research mission. It is not your selling mission. Product samples. You may find that probably on occasions, product samples is a good idea to go about it, because the people you're going to be meeting with will have some idea what you're trying to be eventually selling in the market. And they may be straightforward with you, okay, this is a product which I'm interested to take on as a distributor, or perhaps it needs some modifications that when you go to market, you have to modify to be able to fit the local regulations or the local taste. So if you have some product samples, this is great when it's appropriate. And also, many cultures actually is appropriate to take a small gift, but this gift has to be culturally appropriate. For example, with China, I always give this example because actually a friend of mine managed to do that, providing a trade delegation from China with the company branded clocks as presents. So that didn't go well simply because in China, a clock or watch as a gift is the biggest no-no in the Chinese culture, as symbolizes bad luck and running out of time. So it is very critical not to think, okay, I've got these great promotional products, promotional clocks or whatever other marketing material you can have that will be applicable to the market. Make sure you research what is considered as a good gift and properly culturally accepted gift. And it's very important, especially in China, you're building relationships starting with gift exchange. It's very, very important. We can see here in Chamber of Commerce when we have trade delegations, they always bring a gift to our CEO. And they're very formal when it comes to gift exchange. And you really need to know the business practice before to be venturing in full exporting strategies and trying to get into the market and selling your products over there. Do not try to sell on the first visit. This trip is purely for the development of researching the market, adding the bits and pieces of your market research which you didn't have in Australia, verify additional market research which needed to be verified, and also develop the start of a relationships with key entities which will be able to help you with your business in the market. If you make a sale, just take it as a bonus. Keeping records is very important because you may be able to claim your marketing expenses in Austrian Export Markets Development Grant at a later stage. And finally, and not lastly, developing business relationships. Your new contacts not only can provide you with essential advice in relation to your export venture, these contacts can be critical for you to monitor the market, to accommodate market changes and successfully sell your product. You may find that in many cultures, building the relationships comes before the deal, as building trust first is required. China and Japan are such examples, where the value of relationship is highly regarded. You've done with your trip, you have all your findings, you're coming back to Australia, what's next? Once you're back in Australia, analyze the findings and the recommendations. And make sure you follow up as soon as possible with your new in-market contacts to thank them for their time and also for the additional feedback, to obtain additional feedback if it is required. Build and maintain the relationships which you believe would be of value to your business. And start preparing for your next steps, which are to decide on an appropriate market entry option. Now you have enough information by this stage to decide which way to go about entering this market. And commence planning for your exports. And these are the topics of our next two webinars. In summary, make sure you conduct your market research properly, follow our steps and recommendations, provided by us, and please don't forget that help is available. And if you need any clarification or additional information, we're just a step away. Just email us or give us a call. We will provide you with all the information required. CCQ also has partnership with many organizations that can help you as well with the process. As you can see, there are many resources available for you to find helpful information, advice, and support when you're looking to export your product or your service. Asking for assistance from reliable sources allow you not only to collect your data, but also to have the further understanding the requirements involved with exporting and to ensure that your business is in the best possible position prior to entering the overseas market. If help is required, just contact us, get in touch with us, and we will provide you the contact details or introduce you to the right person in these organizations to assist you. And this concludes my presentation for today. If you have any questions, please ask us in the Q&A session or by contacting us after the webinar. Thank you for your time today. I know it is a valuable time and appreciate your participation in the webinar today. Now I'll hand back to Amanda, who will facilitate the Q&A session.
Thank you very much, Diana. Yes, we have received a few questions come through. First one, there's all those steps you've gone through the market research, very comprehensive. How long or how much time can one expect to work through this process of market research before actually entering the market?
Thanks, Amanda. It is not a simple question because it is a lot. You have to look at all different factors that you have to research and investigate. It really depends of what information you already have available. Do you have any information available? Do you have somebody in overseas market who already have some information for you? So you can't really say in figures, I need 5 hours on 50 hours. However, keep in mind that about 70% of your preparation for export will be research. Because if you don't have the data, and you wouldn't be able first to make informed decision how to go about it. Is this market suitable for your product? What are the best strategies for this market? How you can be competitive in this market? You really have to know a lot about this market before to decide, yes, I'm going to be venturing into exporting into this market. So to answer your question, all I can say is allocate sufficient time to be able to conduct your research, because it's not going to be a simple answer to that one. And don't forget that you have to go into market to verify data, to get additional data as well. So it could be quite time consuming.
Okay, and just further to that, is this a costly exercise to a company?
Building a new market and preparing to build a new market, I should say, that's the proper answer. Preparing for exporting to new market, of course, there are costs involved, because some research may not be readily available. You might have to consider using market research agencies such as Euromonitor, and they're costly. Other data you may have to obtain from overseas, which is also you have cost involved by the travel, accommodation, your time, the time that you're going to be away from your business. But the good thing is that Export Market Development Grants is a grant which can help with your marketing expenses. So that's why when you starting preparing for your exports, keep a track of what marketing expenses you have, and if there cost involved, just keep the receipts. And then we can get you in touch with Austrade from one of our colleagues to discuss with you export market development grants and how you can actually, if you qualify to a certain criteria, you can claim back up to 50% of the marketing expenses. But to answer your question, yes, there are costs involved, and you should have some finance strategies in place about how to finance this part of your export, this step of the process.
Okay, thank you. Next one, what if there is no FTA in place for the market that I'm looking at?
Look, the free trade agreements are absolutely fabulous when it comes to opening market access opportunities, and also giving you with a competitive advantage, or I should say giving your importer a competitive advantage when they're importing your product. If your product happens to be covered by the free trade agreement and there are reduced rates tariff rates associated with this product, it is going to be cheaper for your importer then if your importer has to do an import of a similar product from a country which this particular country he is in doesn't have a free trade agreement. So from a cost perspective, having a free trade agreement between our country and the country where the importer is advantageous, because you can also win your sales contracts if they look at cost factor and tariff reductions. But that doesn't mean that you have to export only to countries which have free trade agreements. Our government is absolutely fabulous in negotiating free trade agreements, and more agreements are coming into place. The most recent one was the Trans-Pacific Partnership agreement just recently from the 30th of December last year became operational. So you're exporting to the market where you believe you have the most competitive advantage, and there is a place for your product and there are customers for your product, regardless whether there is a free trade agreement or not. Eventually, if there is a free trade agreement with this market, excellent. If it's even better, most cost savings and more, there will be more contracts for you as well, most likely because there will be opportunities for more market access to your product and reduced tariff rates for your product as well.
Excellent. And last one, how do I go about communicating with the language barrier? Should I be going out learning different languages to help?
Oh, Amanda, I wouldn't actually suggest this to anybody to start learning a different language just to go to a meeting. My recommendation is, if you can afford to have as part of your export department a person who is from the culture of the market where you're going to be exporting. For example, in our team, we have a Korean person, Australian Korean team member who is fluent in Korean, and we can listen to his Korean all day, because many of our exporters actually who are exporting to Korea, they need assistance with their overseas partners, and we providing them the resource to speak with Korean and translate in Korean. So my suggestion is, if you can, employ somebody who speaks the language and have the international trade background. If not, when you go to the market, facilitate through ourselves or directly with our Trade and Trade Investment Queensland. Perhaps the trade commissioners can help to find a person who can actually understand the language, speaks the language, and also is familiar with the business culture in place, and can translate the silent language as well in the meeting. Because let's say, for example, if you have people nodding in a meeting, that doesn't really mean that they agree with me. It's just be a matter of them being polite. So it's very, very important to understand. If you don't speak the language, it's very, very important to have somebody who speaks the language and understand the meaning.
Excellent. Okay, that's all the time we have now. Thank you, Diana, for coming in today. Also, thank you for everyone that joined today's session. We will send out an email later that has the recording and the slides and contact details if you have any export-related questions. As Diana mentioned, our next webinar is going to be focusing on export marketing strategy. So this will focus focus on our most popular market entry strategies available. We'll also talk about distributors and agents and other ways to get into the market, and discuss the criterion on how to find and monitor, train and evaluate distributors, among other topics. So this one is the third one in the series. It is on March 28. We will send through links to that to register, followed by our fourth one in the series on marketing and planning considerations on April 11. So all that will be sent out for you to register. Thanks for joining, and on behalf of CCIQ, we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.